You're watching tonight on News Central. A reminder of our top stories. President Tinubu urges United Nations to embrace sweeping reforms, seeks permanent seat for Nigeria. News Central hosts town hall series on diaspora voting, amplifies voices of Nigerians abroad ahead of next general elections. And former French President Nicolas Sarkozy sentenced to 5 years in prison over criminal conspiracy involving late Libyan leader. Let's go back to New York, where News Central's lead correspondent Bernard Akede is standing by to provide a recap of today's events at the ongoing UN General Assembly. Bernard, good to see you again. Day 3. Run us through the key events today and some of the takeaways.
Felicity, for me, the key events, I would say, were the speeches given by two presidents who I would say are going through similar issues. And of course, that's talking about the president of Somalia here in Africa and then the Palestinian president. Most interestingly, I would say the Palestinian president, because he had to give his own speech virtually, like most had predicted. And of course, that was because he wasn't granted visa to come to the United States of America. Of course, we know the issues going on between Palestine and Israel. Now, I'll start with him. The Palestinian president, first of all, condemned entirely the bombardment of Palestine, most of parts of Palestine by Israel. He thanked most profoundly the countries that have been holding pockets of protest peaceful, he did say, in their own regions for the sake of Palestine. He also called for a complete ceasefire by Israel. He called for the United Nations to use its goodwill, to use its good name and its power to see that this needless war, as they put it, is brought to an end. He also said that the country would ensure that that Palestine will be away from the hands of terrorists, basically, and the law and order will be restored. He said things like to ensure that there will be one unified government in Palestine and that government will see to the smooth running of the state. But he also asked that Israel evacuate the West Bank and other parts that they have occupied. And he's looking towards the international community to also support Palestine and other warring countries or other war-torn countries, in seeking peace going forward. And what the Somalian president also said, coming to Africa, was quite similar to what the Palestinian president did say, starting with the Somalian president also stood in solidarity with the people of Palestine and the president. I'm also remembering that Somalia has also been experiencing, unrest for a number of years, I beg your pardon, and that the president of Somalia equally called for the United Nations, particularly the Security Council, to take charge of the issues going on and ensure that there is indeed security in parts of Africa and, of course, around the world. And now, finally, of course, the Somalian president joined his voice with several other African presidents asking and demanding that Africa be given a permanent seat at the Security Council. And the hope is that if Africa does have that permanent seat, perhaps there might be changes in the Security Council. Perhaps some countries will not have a monopoly of, the running of security issues around the globe. Of course, by some countries, we're talking about some of the big countries who are the big donors to the United Nations. So basically, I think I would like to say that these were my two takeaways when it comes to day 3 of the 88th United Nations General Assembly.
Bernard, what have been the reactions, especially African leaders, following the jaw-breaking addresses by Nigeria's Vice President and Kenya's President William Ruto?
So, well, first of all, while those addresses were going on inside the hall right there, you could see some reverberating rounds of applause, particularly for the two presidents you talked about, William Ruto and Nigeria's Vice President Kashim Shettima, representing the president of Nigeria. And this is because both of them hit hard on certain points that not just Africa, but the rest of the world should listen to. Before we started at the very beginning, day 1, I did mention that there will be a lot of similarities when you listen to what African leaders will be saying. And some of those similarities include, 1, that Africa be given a permanent seat at the Security Council. 2, debt relief, such that rather than servicing humongous debts, Africa can move those resources towards the SDGs and developing their countries. 3, there's also talk about migration, international trade, and of course, climate change, and then of course there's this heavy conversation concerning AI. So for each of these topics and probably a few more, each time these world leaders hammered on them, you could hear the applause within the crowd coming from both Africans and non-Africans alike, because truly these conversations need to be had. And I'll end with the Nigerian Vice President, Kashim Shettima, who did not ask, but in his words, it was more like a demand that not just Africa, but that Nigeria as a...
Okay, since we have the challenge again with a network, we apologize for the interruption, but I was just getting to talk about Vice President Kashim Shettima's insistence that Nigeria gets a permanent place.